Hello and welcome to the program. I am Suren. Here are a few intriguing questions. These are based on subjects you may be hearing a lot about these days, or about even question them. Why do flat earthers and conspiracy theorists seem to embrace the social media-based and adopted theories and viewpoints against the scientific facts? That is a good question. Do they operate on their religious convictions, perhaps, thus forming a cultist lifestyle? Where does their idea originate from, really? What do they base their truths, which they preach about, by a variety of means, similar to Jehovah's Witnesses cult? What really makes them feel convinced that their viewpoints are scientifically proved or provable? What can really prove the earth being flat? Let the truth be spoken. We can perhaps rephrase the first two questions. Why flat earth and conspiracy theorists embrace their assumptions and viewpoints against the scientific facts? Do they operate on the religious terms that's forming a cult style? Some curious folk, like myself, and a few others, including scientists, professors, and students of psychology, had a number of conversations on flat earthers, spirits, spirit communication, and conspiracy theories. Some of the experiences we had, on the other hand, can indeed show even more extraordinary beliefs from all around the world. If you are interested in traveling and visited a number of countries with multiple belief systems and traditions like myself, you would be even more interested in today's subject. In February 22, 2020, Mike Hughes, as we were told, who took out a homemade rocket to the Mojave Desert and launched himself into the sky. Why did he do that, do you think? Well, was it primarily a case of curiosity or a form of suicide in style? Further discoveries proved that it was apparently to view the flatness of the Earth from space. This was his third attempt, and tragically, it was also a fatal one and the last one. He was crushed shortly after takeoff and died. He was known with his nickname, Mad Mike. Is it not crazy to risk your life fighting for a theory that was already disproven in ancient Greece? But as we know, those striking personal convictions are not really unique. Let me elaborate a little further. Across all the documented cultures, people have held strong beliefs which appeared to be like the long sought after evidence being in their favor. One might even refer to them as the extraordinary beliefs. For evolutionary anthropologists, like one of the authors I read about, puts it plainly, the ubiquity of these kinds of beliefs remains a puzzle. And I will totally agree with it. The author also emphasizes that the human brains evolved to form accurate models of the world. Agreeingly, I will say, most of the time, we do a pretty good job with our brains. So why do people also often adopt and develop beliefs that miss strong supporting evidence? In a recent review in the journal Trends in Cognitive Sciences, proposing a simple answer, the author furthers thus: people who are comfortable to believe in a flat earth, the spirits, and microchip vaccines for the same reasons they come to believe in anything else. Their own experiences obviously lead them to consider those beliefs as true. In addition to this, we can also observe theories on extraordinary beliefs. However, we need to remember that most social scientists have taken an alternative view on the subject we are concentrating on. Just like the author has come up with a conclusion that supernatural beliefs, conspiracy theories, and pseudoscience have struck researchers as totally impervious to the contrary evidence. As a result, they have assumed that experience is not relevant to the formation of those beliefs. Instead, they have concentrated on two other and clearly explanatory factors. The first common explanation is cognitive biases. Many psychologists argue that humans possess mental shortcuts for reasoning about how the world works. Let us remember that people are quite prone to seeing intentions and intelligence behind random events. A bias of this kind might explain why people often believe that it is the controlled or even predestined phenomena such as weather or illnesses. The second factor is the social dynamics in a given society. People adopt certain beliefs not because they are certain of them being true, but because other people also hold on to those beliefs. All they want is to signal something about themselves to others. Just like those who support a certain football club or belong to a fraternity. Some conspiracy theorists may adopt strange beliefs because those beliefs come with a community of loyal and supportive co-believers. It is therefore not surprising that they try to convince others to supposedly to wake them up to their own realities as dictated by their own belief and biases, just as the house-to-house preachers do. Both of these approaches can partly explain how people come to hold extraordinary beliefs. However, they discount them in three ways that experience in tandem with the other two factors and which can also form extraordinary beliefs in the process. 1. Experience can be utilized as a filter. First, like the author has been proposing it to be, an experience to act as a filter. In fact, it determines which extraordinary beliefs can successfully spread throughout a population. Take the flat earth theory for an example. We all know with absolute certainty that it is false. But it is no more or less wrong than a theory that the earth is shaped like a cone or even some other geometric shape. So, what makes the flat earth so much more successful than these equally incorrect alternatives? Good question. The answer is an obvious one. As it seems, the earth looks flat when you are standing on it, not at all cone-shaped or yet another. The visual evidence favors one extraordinary belief over the others. Of course, scientific evidence clearly shows that the earth is round, but it is not surprising that some people prefer to trust what their eyes are telling them. 2. Experience is a spark, says the author. My second argument is that experience acts as a spark for extraordinary beliefs, he says. Strange experiences, such as auditory hallucinations, are difficult to explain, let alone understand, at least by some. So, people do their best to explain them, and doing so, they come up with beliefs that seem fitting this strange situation. Imagine that you are encountering some of your deceased relatives and friends and communicating with them. For this pathway, as the author puts it, sleep paralysis is an excellent case study. Sleep paralysis happens in the space between sleeping and waking. You feel like you are awake, but you cannot move or speak. It may be terrifying and also quite common. And, interestingly, sufferers usually feel like there is a threatening agent, perhaps a devil, sitting on their chest. I will remain in agreement with the author's interpretation, wherein sleep paralysis is considered as the result of neural confusion. But it is not difficult to picture how someone without a scientific background, that is, nearly every human being in history, might interpret the experience as evidence of supernatural beings. Angels, devils, spirits, you name it. 3. I too will consider the experience as a tool, and the third potential route to extraordinary beliefs, and which can be especially intriguing. In many cases, people don't just develop extraordinary beliefs, they develop immersive practices that make those beliefs feel true. As in the case of Jehovah's Witnesses. For example, the author beautifully illustrates when saying, imagine that you are a farmer living in the highlands. You suffer a series of miscarriages and want to know why. So, you perhaps go to a traditional healer, and she tells you that you can learn the answer from your ancestors by drinking a hallucinogenic brew. You drink the brew, and soon after you begin to see spirits. They speak to you and explain your misfortune. Imagine that someone approaches you and tells you that she or he sees your deceased relative and tells you, in addition to that, he or she is telling you all about your misbehaving partner or child. And if you take all that which is being said very seriously, just consider the consequences. Clearly, an experience like this might reinforce your belief in the existence of spirits, perhaps even evil ones. Such immersive practices, prayers, ritualistic dances, and the religious use of psychoactive substances can create the evidence that makes the associated beliefs feel true. The author then asks, what is next? Extraordinary beliefs are not inherently good or bad. In particular, religious beliefs provide meaning, security, and a sense of community for billions of people. And that's a fact. But some extraordinary beliefs are sources of serious concern. I have experienced it. That's a different story. Now, considering misinformation about science and politics is rampant and immensely dangerous. Thankfully, by recognizing how those beliefs are shaped by experience, researchers can find better ways to combat their spread. Just as importantly, though, we may suggest some perspective views which might encourage more compassion and kinship toward people who hold beliefs that seem very different from yours. We may need to appreciate that they are not mad or insincere. Like any other human beings, they probably think the evidence is on their side. Yet expert voices still rise above the noise level. I will agree with the following notion, that when clicks and algorithms drive the news, it is easy to lose sight of what truly matters. The simple conversation with experts may offer a better way, bringing you insights, explaining rather than inflaming. Think about it. One still tends to question, why does anything and everything look flat even though the earth is round? Do you know? Kelly McGregor is a professor of geology, and she writes the following. Ever since the ancient Greeks first made observations of the circular moon in the skies, scientists have known that the earth is a sphere. We have all been able to see beautiful images of the earth from space. Some even photographed by astronauts, and others collected the images remotely by orbiting satellites. So why does not our planet look round when we are standing in a park or looking out a window? The answer is all about perspective. If you have attended academia for art classes, you would immediately grasp the importance thereof. Humans are pretty tiny creatures living on a really large sphere. An average adult is between 5 feet and 6.6 inches tall, or 1.5 to 2 meters. And kids are smaller still. Imagine that you are a circus acrobat standing on a ball, writes the author, that is about 3 feet or 1 meter wide. From on top of the ball, you would see it curving away from your feet in all directions. Now, a tiny fly lands on that circus ball. Its viewpoint would probably be a millimeter or less above the surface. Since the fly is much smaller than the wall, and its view is close to the surface, it cannot see the whole ball. While the Earth is about 42, million feet, or 12.8 thousand meters wide, and even a tall adult's viewpoint is just 6 feet, or about 2 meters above its surface. There is no way our eyes can take in the size of this vertical Earth when we are standing on it. One could not tell the Earth was fair or sphere even if your height on the top of Mount Everest, which is 29.035 feet or 8,850 meters above the sea level. The only way to see the curvature of the Earth is to fly more than 6 miles or 10 kilometers above its surface. This is because the length of the horizon that we see depends on how high we are above Earth's surface. Standing on the ground with nothing blocking our vision, our eyes can see about 3 miles or 4.8 kilometers of the horizon. That is not enough of the planet's circumference to see the horizon line begin to show off its curve. Like a fly on a circus ball, we just cannot see enough of the edge where the Earth meets the sky. Right. To see holes on a vertical planet, you would need to hitch a ride with an astronaut or a satellite or a spacecraft. This would give you a full view of Earth from a much greater distance. The commercial airliners also can fly high enough to glimpse the Earth's curvature, although pilots have much better view from the front of the aeroplane than passengers get from the side windows. Although it is not quite a sphere, it is not a flat plane and is three-dimensional. Don't forget that. Even from space, you would not detect something important about Earth's shape. It's not perfectly round. It is actually slightly opioid-stirred, or just an opioid. This means it is a little bit wider around the equator. Then it is tall. That is fair or sphere if someone sat on and squashed it a little bit. However, this is caused by Earth's rotation, which creates a centrifugal force, the same force that would cause you to fly off a spinning merry-go-round if you didn't hold on. This force produces a slight bulge at the planet's waistline. Topographic features on Earth's surface, such as mountains and deep sea trenches, also distort its shape slightly. They cause small variations in the strength of Earthian gravitational field, the force that pulls all objects on Earth downward towards the planetary center. Although it is one of the weaker forces, as some claim, there is no other force that can be identified as Earth's gravity field that keeps the air, water, soil, and you on its surface. That is a fact. Earth science, the field that the author studies, has a branch called geodesy that is devoted to studying Earth's shape and how it's positioned in space. This informs everything from building sewer and making accurate maps of sea levels, rising to launching and tracking spacecraft. It is an important area of current scientific research and a reminder that we are still learning about this amazing planet, Earth, we call home. Since curiosity has no age limit, adults, let us know what you are wondering about too, asks the related publication. Now a question. why does gravity pull us down and not up? Gravity is the reason why things with mass or energy are attracted to each other. It is why apples fall towards the ground and planets orbit stars. Magnets attract some types of metals, but they can also push other magnets away. And there's a reason for it. How come you feel only the pull of gravity? Question mark. In 1915, Albert Einstein figured out the answer when he published his theory of general relativity. The reason gravity pulls you towards the ground is that all objects with mass, like our Earth for example, actually bend and curve the fabric of the universe, and it is called space-time. That curvature is what you feel as gravity. But what is space-time? We might ask. Okay, space is exactly what it sounds like. The three dimensions of space: length, width, and height. Combined with the first dimension, and that is time. Using some very brilliant mathematics, Einstein was the first person to realize that the laws of physics worked in a universe where space and time are merged together. What this means is that space and time are connected. If you move really fast through space, time slows down for you compared to someone who is moving slowly on the surface. This is why astronauts moving very fast in space age a tiny bit more slowly than people on Earth. Matter makes a gravity well, not gravity hills. Remember, gravity is the idea that objects in the universe are attracted to each other because space-time is bent and curved. When Einstein came up with general relativity, he showed that all stuff in the universe can curve space. In physics terms, that stuff has mass and energy. Since your brain usually thinks about the world in 3 dimensions, it is really very hard to think about the 4 dimensions of space-time as a single idea. So, to make it easier to visualize, imagine the surface of a trampoline. If there is nothing on it, it is flat. Right. But if you stand on the trampoline, it stretches around your feet and creates a valley with you at the center. If there is a ball on the trampoline, it would roll towards your feet. This is a 2-dimensional example of how space-time works. Your mass stretched the trampoline, creating what is called a gravity well that the ball rolls into. This is very similar to how the gravity of a heavy object, like the Earth, pulls those things similar to you and me towards it. To make things even weirder, since space and time are connected, time is also stretched by heavy objects. The heavier you are, the steep sides of the trampoline well becomes more visible. That is why really massive things in the universe, like the sun or black holes, have stronger gravity than Earth. So, why does gravity pull you down and not push you away? Question? Well, imagine someone went under the trampoline and pushed up. The ball would roll away. This would be a gravity hill, not a gravity well. As far as the scientists know, matter or stuff always makes gravity wells and not gravity hills. Scientists can imagine things made of exotic matter or energy that would cause gravity to push you off into space. But so far, no one has found anything that could cause gravity to push you away from Earth. Here is an excellent advice for all humanity. Fight misinformation and stay informed. Many governments are reporting an increase in bad faith actors who operate in a gray zone and deliberately spread misinformation and so help creating more divisions. This trend, coupled with the ongoing risks of radicalization, as you know of, and popularism, makes it clear that if we are to reserve a healthy democracy, a healthy media ecosystem is the only place to start. The idea of flat Earth may seem absurd in the 21st century, and there is today a large and growing number of people who believe in it. This is advanced through an in-depth narrative analysis of 3 individuals' life stories concerning before, during, and after the transition to the new belief. Thus, rather than starting from the typical look at what socio-demographic factors predict about the conspiracy beliefs, we start from a nuance to look at flat Earth believers and their own lives and worlds. An in-depth observation can show how different individual motives, etymological, social, and existential, as well as the knowledge systems, scientific, religious, social, come together in the individual's adoption and reconstruction of conspiracy theories so that they resonate with believers' own personal lives. Most importantly, pleasure theory offers people with comprehensive vision that places human beings at the center of the universe and provides arguments for how life can be meaningful. However, through observation and study we can discover that this is reached through different pathways in accordance with people's unique life histories and challenges of life they must face. Of course, it is healthy to question that if the Earth is really flat, what then? Perhaps science has miscalculated it, and if falsehood has been perpetuated by unscrupulous actors working behind the scenes? Starting this radical skepticism has a potential to turn many accepted worldviews upside down, and as it is for a growing number of people called as flat earthers. And flat earth theory is an alternative explanation of the complex interconnectedness of the universe that starts from the assumption that the world is a disk, in sharp opposition to today's scientific consensus of vertical cosmetology. If the world is in fact flat, then various government agencies, for instance, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, government agencies and educational systems must be all false, and probably the governments and scientific elite are hiding the supposedly known truths from the general public. The present study aims to examine the thought of styles and underlying motives that lead people to believe in a flat earth within a particular cultural tradition. Flat earth theory is approached as a pattern of thinking, characteristic of conspiracy theories, or CTs, that is, nothing happens by accident, nothing is as it seems, and everything is connected. Taking a cultural psychological perspective, it had been argued at research on CTs in general and FES in particular needs to go beyond the typical correlation study of beliefs with a host of other demographic and behavioral measures. For a recent review to explore how beliefs are related to a person as a complex psychological system within a complex cultural context. The analysis here will thus highlight both the content of beliefs and show how personal, social, and cultural factors come together and the influence go lives on three flat earthers. We will talk about them shortly. This already published work involved in analyzing and comparing the contextualized pathways by which they incorporated conspiracy beliefs into their lives, following their progressive internalization and how this relates to life events, other beliefs, cultural symbols, and different psychological motives. In other words, we have been encouraged to follow the framework of cultural psychology to explore the mutual constitution of persons and their social, cultural worlds. Flat Earth belief as a conspiracy theory. Conspiracy theories, or CTs, are responses to the complexity of the world and our abundant times of ambiguity rapidly change. That's a fact. They are the attempts to explain seemingly random events through a secret plot enacted by powerful and evil agents. This points to a distinctive mentality or thought style for making sense of the social world, which is socially embedded with integral relations and their history, says Moscovich, 1987. And Goetzel's 1994 early findings suggested that the best predictor of belief in any conspiracy theories was a belief in other conspiracy theorists. In fact, it has been now defined as a monological way of thinking that expressed a closed mindset, as arguments outside conspiracy theories were not taken into account. Recent findings show arguments that conspiracy theorists should rather be understood biologically, since their beliefs engage in a dialogue with their context. For example, the advanced arguments that are based on semantic and pragmatic relationships were not possible to match the conspirational beliefs, scientific or otherwise. They are marshaled to support only what they are being fed as conspiracy theories. Similarly to others, conspiracy theories, modern flat earth theory does not limit itself to factual explanations, but also incorporates the skepticism about the credibility of modern media, the structure of society, and general complexity of explanations. It actually differs from other conspiracy theorists, however, in its reliance onto uncommon sense. Further arguments based on their own visual experience and the results of homemade models. By contrast, understanding the Earth's vertical form, aside from images of the Earth from space, requires complex mathematical models and trust in experts' knowledge. The homemade models that contradict expert knowledge and let the skepticism about whether people in power are hiding the truth from the majority. If the elite would deceive people about the Earth's shape, what else would they hide? It is thus not surprising that belief in conspiracy theorists coincides with disbelief in many mainstream narratives. Social media has played a key role in the dissemination of misinformation by conspiracy theorists, has been particularly crucial to the propagation of flat earth theory. Visual arguments for flat earth on YouTube and other written arguments on Twitter have been shown to have a strong impact on this belief. Although Landrum et al. Suggested that low scientific knowledge and high conspiration mentality are key factors in susceptibility to flat earth arguments online. Similarly, Giorgio et al. Found that higher levels of scientific reasoning and belief wherein flexibility were negatively associated with conspiracy beliefs. Given the complexity of knowledge in modern society, it is important to approach any beliefs sensitively, and conspiracy theorists are easy to put forward, a difficult to dissolve or disprove, even to cancel idea. Well, much research is addressed on flat earth theory by looking at how social media behaviors influence the conspiracy theorists. It is also essential to examine wherein the psychological processes that prepared the way for seduction in the first place. That is a great fact. From a psychological approach, it has been identified 3 interrelated motives associated with conspiracy belief. Epistemic, understanding one's environment. Existential, having control over one's environment. And social, maintaining a positive image of oneself and the social group. One is part of the epistemic motive, which includes various cognitive biases identified as making people susceptible to conspiracy theories such as illusionary pattern perception through higher order processes in which people jointly construct an image of the world. This has been studied by social representations theory, says Moscovich, 1981. The existential motive highlights the effect that belief in conspiracy theories is so far the highest in situations of unpredictability and uncertainty, and where people feel powerless, say in regard to trust in authorities. Existential threat triggered sensory processes and a search for explanations avoid conspiracy theories. In fact, conspiracy theory belief is consistently much higher on marginalized groups living under conditions of threat, distrust, and powerlessness. Think about it. Finally, the social motive points to how marginalized groups and individuals can become important actors as champions of the truth in the world where everyone has been lied to. Society, religion, and conspiracy theories. A cultural psychological approach requires to consider issues in combination with individual motives. Conspiracy theories, as part of a broader system of culture, society, and history. This societal aspect can fruitfully be approached through social representation theory, which explores how social reality is jointly constructed between people on the basis of previous understandings within a cultural tradition, says Moscovich. First, like other cultural psychological theories, it addresses the complex dialectical relationship between social knowledge and social cognition. This highlights the fact that people make sense of and use the same conspiracy theory in different ways, which will partly be a function of their group affiliations and partly personal factors. Second, all knowledge and belief are situated within a tradition. Conspiracy theories are not created. Remember, ex nihilo or ex nihil nihilo, but built on existing ideas and often previous conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theory's principal features, its history of different conspiracy theories tend to emerge from a common spring, as can be seen in the centuries of conspiracy theories relating to Jews, Freemasons, and Illuminati. Thirdly, it highlights cognitive polyphia, the idea that different knowledge systems and thought styles coexist within the same society and even the same individual. Knowledge is socially organized in a different social context, which in turn interact and mutually enrich one another. Keep that in mind. Agricultural, psychological approaches concur and highlighting the heterogeneous and distributed nature of culture in contrast to cross-cultural psychology in comparison to homogeneous national emergence in the present context. This helps us to explore how conspiracy theories are related to other belief systems and the corresponding styles. World relationships to scientific thinking have already been noted in the context of flat Earth using homemade models and experiments. It is also important to mention the parallels between conspiracy, risks, and religious beliefs. Although there is no definitive description of religion, we may follow William James, 1902, and approaching it as belief in an unseen order, which gives meaning and value to life when we harmonize ourselves to it. However, conspiracy theorists are only religious because the people will believe in them do not possess the institutional features of religions, which is an essential feature of core of source and sociological definitions of religion, like many others, and many elements of religion are selectively reconstructed and integrated into conspiracy theorists' belief, but are done so in a fluid context-dependent way, including specificities of both the religion and conspiracy theory in question. For example, flat earth theory contains many religious elements that can be traced back to the Old Testament, including passages in which the earth is described as flat. Similarly, the dualistic notion of good and evil that is the key to the Judeo-Christian tradition and can be traced back to Zoroastrianism also figures essentially in the flat earth theory. In both, the good forces will often fight the evil forces to restore order. Religious narratives typically contain characteristic representations to emphasize this notion, such as God, Satan, heaven, and hell. Conspiracy theorists generally and typically also use some combination of these in an attempt to explain events as the result of the machinations of powerful, secretive organizations of conspirators. The juristic nature of conspiracy is furiously based on the notion that even the forces which are holding back information from the public with an intent to deceive and control the population. The reasoning behind this notion is that the elite must have a reason to hide the information. If the information is not harmful, there would be no sense of concealing it. Religious representations also serve a social purpose, as they categorize people in society and draw a clear distinction between who is good and who is evil. This trend is also observed within cultist groupings like Jehovah's Witnesses. In addition to the contents, conspiracy theorists and religions serve similar motives. First, they are both rooted in the need for a framework that can overcome challenges that scientific explanations, for example, are unable to address. This includes providing the comfort of knowing the tragic events occurred for a reason. That is the notion of conspiracy theory and religious belief both strengthen in times of uncertainty as a form of compensatory control which substitute a perceived lack of personal control for an external source to do so, whereas religions describe this external source as God, Satan, or karma, and conspiracy theorists typically focus on an evil elite or minority. Believers then cast themselves into a role that forms alliance with the good forces against the evil ones. Another strategy of creating the sea is by placing God as the almighty power, was ultimately bigger than the elite, meaning that the evil act performed by them was a part of God's plan. In short, religious belief and conspiracy theory belief function as a means to affirm the world as a place that can be known and controlled. Within this present study, we aim to explore how different motives and cultural systems operate together in unique individual cases and through time. To do so, one may need to look at how individuals' personalized aspects of collective culture are understood as a system of social representations as originally suggested by the authors. Culture operates here on personal and social levels simultaneously. The former speaks to a person's deep life history and motivation, while the latter concerns how it is understood and positions one piece of the other in society more specifically, and so it can be observed that the implications can be based on contribution to our different systems of belief in flat earths, with the purpose of expanding the present understanding of the people behind flat earth, as well as to nuance the theoretical understanding of conspiracy theories. And by what follows, we present three different life story narratives to this end. Let's call it recruitment. Conspiracy theories are very difficult to observe due to their fundamental distrust towards science, institutions, and society, as well as general fear of being misunderstood. Moreover, they often view universities as being a part of the problem, which can complicate the recruitment of willing participants. With this in mind, it was formulated the request for participants on Facebook, stating that they were looking for members of the Federal Society, or FES, willing to share their experience with the flat earth theory and general life stories, emphasizing that their intentions were to understand their way of thinking and not to be critical of the theory itself. It was aimed to post this description in Facebook groups associated with flat earth authors, but quickly encountered an access problem, as most of the groups were private, writes the author. When requested access and permission to share a post, one would receive generally a rejection. The following week, a few administrators granted us access to the forums, says the author, where we were able to communicate with the group members within a few days of our posting. We experienced a great deal of interaction, but no one volunteered to be interviewed. Some helpful members shared their insights on the theory and community. One member pointed out that some believers of flat earth do not wish to be associated with the FES and suggested changing the post. Interviewers followed out this step, and to their delight, the following day, two people contacted them on Facebook about participating in the research on the premise that they would not be associated with FES, which they assured would be the case. The following week, another person contacted them by email expressing his interest, and with that they succeeded in recruiting 3 participants. They were very cautious of using the terms conspiracy theory, conspiracy theorist, and flat earth, as these could imply judgment and critique, and were often used by the majority to legitimize the theories and the who believed in them. In meeting their participants, they were mindful of the connotations attached to the terms, and so they asked each of the participants if they had any alternative term they preferred to be used during the interview. None of 3 participants had any objections. And during their conversations, it became clear that they all referred to themselves as flat earthers and used the word conspiracy theory when talking about their beliefs. These curious observations will be elaborated on in the following discussions later. Let's talk about interviews. The semi-structured interviews were set up to encourage participants to narrate their individual life stories while also prompting reflection on their own perceptions and experiences. The interview guide consisted of open questions about their lives before and after encountering the flat earth theory, which allowed them to select which parts of their lives they found worth mentioning. We phrased the questions in such a way to invite the answers to appear as a coherent narrative with the beginning, middle, and end, says the author. This method enabled a reciprocal conversation between the participant and interviewer, including follow-up questions for greater accuracy and the opportunity to expand on particular points presented by the participants. This is, of course, a retrospective account of their life experiences, which is subjective, constructive, remembering. As such, they treated it as expressed, as what is psychologically active and relative for them now, rather than providing a faithful account of events as they happened. All interviews consented to be recorded and for the data to be used for the study in an anonymized form. This research was conducted in accordance with APA ethical principles. A special IRB approval not required in the Danish system, but the study was conducted, the interviews are carried out in English and Danish perspective according to the participants' origin, arranged between 45 to 90 minutes. All three interviews took place in March 2021, using Zoom Subscribe to capture the context and flow the conversation using minimal punctuation. Here is the analysis. They looked at them as in a case study approach in order to capture the complexity of individual experiences in the context. This approach contained a high level of detail and in-depth descriptions at a micro level and through time. The method is often criticized as not providing a basis for generalization because of the small sample size. However, this is to misunderstand the nature of generalization. For understanding the phenomenon, case studies aimed to generalize and the theoretical models can be tested against other single cases. In relation to conspiracy theory, the aim had to show how different motives identified by Douglas et al. In 2019 become important and stressed at different times and to different ends. Thus, their analysis goes beyond. Douglas' abstract psychology was to show how they played out in concrete individual lives and through time. One said that he cannot trust academics, media, and political systems, and which is a classical feature of conspiration rational thinking. The following statement captures his distrust. He said, if you woke up to flat earth, if you woke up to someone being able to make up a lie as big as the earth being round, that is just insane. That is the whole education system being infected in some way. The moon landing is a story in itself, but it is 100% false. I am 100% convinced of that. If governments can lie about the moon landing and satellites in shape of the earth, well, they can lie about viruses and keep us in some kind of captivity for a whole year now. This person particularly was critical about COVID-19 and believed that the Danish government is part of the Illuminati network, which aims to make the general public sick using vaccines. Furthermore, your points out that 9/11 was an inside job. And on conclusion, he has drawn, based on evidence presented in YouTube videos, he further explains that while he doesn't trust mainstream media, he considers Fox News and selected YouTubers to be reliable and gets his information through these sources. It seems that this person has sacrificed personal relationships for the sake of his deep investment in the flat earth theory. The theory seems to mean to serve an existential motive for him and making life meaningful. He has stated that Big Bang theory is not true, as it would mean that mankind is an accidental creation of stardust. It says you are just a coincidence. You are stardust, rather than you being the center of the universe and having something to live for. The latter theory, on the other hand, puts man at the center and provides a unified explanation of existence. The other person did his own experiments and calculations describing his actions as an attempt at compound compensatory control, image serving or searching for something starting and controllable following the unforeseen tragedy. After a year of research, he became a firm believer of the flat earth theory, and this provided him with a better understanding of the world. His fear of the unpredictable was replaced by the new truth, making a major turning point in his life. He explained how he noticed that there were discrepancies between his own calculations and the scientific explanation of gravity, as described by Moscovich. This can be viewed as an effort to convert complex science to a more concrete, tangible, and relatable object. Further, he pointed out that he began to spot mistakes and lies in information provided by NASA. The amount of NASA videos I have watched were like, whether it is CGR or green screen or whatever it is that they are doing, you can see the faults in them. You can see the wires that they are hanging from. And it almost looks comical now to watch it, because I sit there and point it out altogether. He argues that we are all caught in a matrix that is impossible to escape, and our destiny is to serve the elite. People who are unaware of this and don't rebel against the elite, he classifies them as sheep. When I asked if you would ever consider his beliefs, he would answer that he would never be able to see the truth that have presented themselves to him during the last years of his research. So continues the author. He highlighted that he does not consider himself religious, but convinced that there is a creator. Although he distances himself from religion, he mentioned several religious elements throughout the interview. These elements consist of mythical stories, God, Satan, the soul, and the Bible. He mentions that Disney, which is owned by the elite, places sexual objects in their movies with the purpose of influencing the children watching them. The evidence for this is the mark of the beast, which can be found in the barcodes as well as in numerology. He takes note of the number 666, the number of the devil, as well as the number 33, which allegedly is a code for the elite, indicating that what is being said is a lie. He continually referred to the Bible and explained that he has come to the realization that some of its prophecies have come true. Prophecies are often seen in relation to conspiracy theory, serving as a form of confirmation that tends to go strengthening the belief more. Despite having distanced himself from religion, his narrative and explanations contained religious suspects. Yet another person, 3, and in his 50s, from US spoke a few additional issues. While researching this topic, he came across a video explaining the distance is based on flat earth theory, and he began to explore it further by reading books and articles as well as watching YouTube videos. He explained that he chose to believe in the flat earth theory as a majority of the evidence presented was based on the Bible and therefore aligned with his beliefs. He confided that he has not lived as long, but nevertheless has remained strong in his faith in God throughout his life. For a period, he said he explored other religions, but explaining that eventually returned to Christianity and has been a faithful believer ever since Earth is assimilated into this framework. Thus, conspiracy theorists, it's not uniquely used as a way to give meaning to life, but rather functions in combination with which is already a firm Christian belief. Any gravity-related issues don't make a sense either. Why hasn't the moon been sucked into the earth after all these years? If gravity is so strong that it holds the atmosphere on Earth against the vacuum of space, but you cannot fly off of it, and birds can fly, airplanes can fly, it just seems so bizarre the more you think about it. Unlike the person 1 and 2, the person 3 does not perform his own experiments. He trusts that other flat earthers conduct reliable research. He stands firm in his belief when asked about the scientific explanation of gravity, explaining that he has no intention of changing his mind. This can be viewed as an example of confirmation or confirmation bias. This could explain also why he prefers the Bible verses. He seems to confirm the flat earth theory. Continually explaining the society is divided into an outgroup with 3 distinct parts, or already discussed with person 1 and 2, and this third person says the elite one's main motive is hiding the existence of God to make it easier for them to control the rest of the population, who he categorizes as sheep as well. This is apparently achieved by falsifying material from outer space, whereby Earth appears round, and does the Bible subscribe to a flat Earth appears incongruent. He also adds, if you really look at the old spaceship from 1969, that thing doesn't look like it could go anywhere, would you? The little module, they say it was on the moon and then back. It's just unbelievable. If you really look at what they show that thing is made out of, it is unbelievable that we fell for that. He seems to be discouraged as he explains that the sheep repeatedly believed that the lies manufactured by the elite and expressed the general public's distress of public agencies and science. Additionally, explaining that he finds it important to make others aware of the elite one's agenda in order to prevent future from being accepted by the public. In reality, no, it doesn't really change the way we live. If it is flat or round, it doesn't really change it. Then if you go to the next step, who's running it and why are they lying to us and spending all that money? He concludes this way. In the end, it's just a faith thing on that stuff. Will it make anything change? No. He said the only significant change in it was that he is not confirmed. And as earlier, wondering about the distance between the celestial objects, flat earth theory has provided him the answers. From these cases, it appears that all these three participants each formed their own worldview by drawing on others' knowledge or knowledge systems. This includes YouTube videos, scientific studies performed only by themselves and others, religious elements, statements from the media, as well as questioning conspirational social structure and individual life circumstances. The life narrative analysis indicates that our participants select and refashion different elements and integrate them into their vision of reality, says the author. They become features of their own personal culture. Three life narratives show how their understanding and argumentation for the earth being flat has not been ever in an echo chamber, but instead draws on existing cultural and social elements, conspirational key, symbols, personal models and calculations, religious statements, and general skepticism toward the structure of society, but also the social setting in which the people will believe in flat earth find themselves in. Itself is constructed in interaction with other people. Flat earthers emerge as a community that shares the same ontological understandings, which differ radically for the majority's understanding of cosmetology and social structure. This makes it interesting to discuss the extent to which flat earthers understand themselves as part of a community and how group affiliation influences their self-understanding. Flat Earth Society, or FES, has received media exposure through the Netflix documentaries Behind the Curve. It would be reasonable to assume that group affiliation contributes to the transition into a new cosmological and cultural understanding. However, preliminary and critical research showed the importance of distinguishing between Flat Earth Society and Flat Earthers, as all our participants did not want to be associated with the FES. Here we have examined how a cultural psychological approach can unfold, says the author. Belief systems related to a person is a complex psychological system within a complex cultural system. Our empirical study has contributed to show how different systems of beliefs confide in flat Earth. Flat Earthers draw on both scientific arguments, religious elements, as well as conspirational questions about the social structure. To expand the current understanding of individuals behind flat Earth beliefs and to provide a nuanced, theoretical perspective on conspiracy theory way of thinking, we have employed an integrative methodology. This approach suggested that individual, social, historical, and socio-cultural elements all play a role in shaping the worldviews of flat earthers and conspiracy theorists in general. With other studies, our observations suggested that people need to create an occurrence and cohesive explanation of the world, which increases when the world is perceived as an uncertain place. Conspiracy risks can offer epistemic explanations as well as fulfilling existential and social desires. Conspiracy believers, to a greater extent, respond to a lack of epistemic trust in representative democracy and a desire to give more power to the people. Furthermore, this study illustrates the sense of meaning is attained through diverse pathways influenced by each individual's unique life history and personal challenges. Thus, a cultural psychological approach offers a comprehensive framework for understanding the complex and context-dependent nature of flat earthers' beliefs, as it allows us to explore how personal and cultural factors interact to shape individual worldviews, providing a deeper and more nuanced understanding that is typical in the study of conspiracy theorists. Christine Bahus is MA student in psychology at Aalborg University in Denmark. So is also Maja Sodinger Jorgensen, and Brede Wagner is a professor of psychology at the University of Copenhagen and Aalborg. Our thanks go for their contributions and in-depth study and presentations. Very much appreciated. Once again, thank you for sharing this program, and we will meet you again for another quality presentation by the next episode. Thank you.